He said "Daddy" at the park yesterday. 7 words on a screen. 7 words on my fiancé's unlocked iPad. 11 days before our wedding, in a message from a woman I had never heard of, about a child I didn't know existed. We had $102,000 in our joint wedding account that morning. 3 years of my bartending tips, my paralegal overtime, my mother's $200 from her cleaning job, my brother Carlos's $500 from his electrician's apprenticeship. By the time I finished reading 247 messages across 14 months of conversation, $11,000 remained. $91,000 had been transferred to a woman named Danielle Becker in Bridgeport, Connecticut, who had been with my fiancé since before he met me and had given birth to his son 4 months after our first date. I didn't cancel the wedding. I called my mother, I called my attorney, and I spent the next 11 days preparing something James Morrow never expected to find, waiting for him at the altar in front of 200 people. But let me start from the beginning, because a woman doesn't take a microphone at her own ceremony and burn everything to the ground unless every single road behind her has already been sealed shut. My name is Elena Vargas. I'm 32 years old now, but I was 29 when everything fell apart. I grew up on the 6th floor of an apartment building in the South Bronx, where the elevator worked when it felt like it, and the hallway always smelled like somebody's grandmother's sofrito. My mother, Rosa Vargas, raised me and my younger brother Carlos alone after my father left when I was 4. Not with drama or a fight, just the quiet disappearance of a man who one day stopped coming home. My mother never spoke badly about him. She just never spoke about him at all, which is its own kind of verdict when you're a kid counting empty chairs at the dinner table. She cleaned office buildings at night, the marble floors of law firms in Midtown, gleaming under fluorescent lights long after the lawyers went home, and worked the register at a bodega during the day. She slept 5 hours a night, sometimes 4, and she never complained about any of it, at least not where we could hear. My grandmother, Abuela Carmen, lived 3 blocks east. She came every Sunday without fail. Rain, snow, July heat that turned the sidewalk soft, carrying grocery bags and stories. She braided my hair while rice cooked on the stove, her hands smelling of garlic and palmolive soap, and between braids she told me about beautiful things she'd seen in magazines at the dentist's office. Weddings, always weddings. Flower arches that curved overhead like doorways into different lives. Champagne towers catching light. Dresses that trailed behind the bride like clouds that had decided to follow her. "Mija," she'd say, tugging a braid tight enough to make my eyes water. "One day you'll have all of this, every bit, but you have to build it yourself. Nobody is going to hand you a thing. Not in this country, not in this city, not on this block. You build it with your own hands, or you don't have it." She died when I was 16, heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon. I found her sitting in her kitchen chair, with her hands folded in her lap, face peaceful, like she'd just finished a prayer. I sat across from her and held her hand for 20 minutes before I called anyone. That afternoon, I made myself a promise. Whatever I built, it would be beautiful enough for both of us. I put myself through college working weekends at a laundromat, transferred to John Jay on a scholarship, and got a paralegal certificate while holding a full-time job as a dental office receptionist. By 25, I had a real position at a personal injury firm in Lower Manhattan, a studio apartment in Washington Heights I could afford on my own, and a savings account I fed every single month without exception. Brick by brick, the way Abuela told me. I was not wealthy. I was not particularly special. I was just a woman who understood early that nobody was going to build my life for me, so I'd better get comfortable with doing it myself. I met James Morrow at a friend's birthday dinner in Hell's Kitchen when I was 26. He was 30, tall, well-dressed without being showy, navy blazer, clean white shirt, a watch that was good but not the kind that announces itself. Warm voice. A smile that arrived slowly, like he was deciding whether you'd earned it, and when you did, the whole room got brighter. Pharmaceutical sales, regional account manager, company car, health benefits, business cards with embossed lettering. From Stamford, Connecticut. Parents still married, one younger brother. Our first date was at a Thai restaurant in the West Village. He ordered for both of us after asking what I liked, which I would normally have hated, but the food was perfect, and he made me laugh 4 times before the appetizers arrived. When he walked me to the subway, he didn't try to kiss me. He just stood under the streetlight with his hands in his pockets and said, "I'd really like to see you again, Elena. You're the most interesting person I've talked to in months. Not beautiful, not hot, not sexy. Interesting." That word opened a door in me I didn't know was closed. He proposed a year later on the rooftop of my building in Washington Heights. String lights and candles everywhere. Dozens of votive candles in glass jars flickering in the November wind. My mother was hiding behind the stairwell door with her phone recording, which meant he'd called her first and coordinated, which meant he understood that in my family, you don't ask the woman without asking her mother. He went down on one knee and said, "Elena, I want to build something with you. Something real? Something that lasts." I said yes before he finished the word, lasts. My mother burst through the door crying so hard she could barely hold the phone steady. The video is shaky and beautiful, and I haven't watched it since October 14th. We opened the joint wedding savings account 2 weeks after the engagement. Chase Bank, my idea. No debt, no credit cards, pay for everything in cash. Start a marriage without a financial hole. "Whatever you want, babe," James said, signing the paperwork with an easy smile. "This is your day, your dream. I'm just here to make it happen." He said that a lot. Your day, your dream. I thought it was love. Selfless, supportive, let her shine love. It was actually distance. The calculated distance of a man who already knows the wedding isn't going to happen the way you think it is, and who needs enough separation from the planning that when everything collapses, his hands will look clean. For 3 years, I worked 2 jobs, bartending 4 nights a week at a cocktail lounge in Midtown, craft cocktails, $12 tips from finance guys who couldn't tell bourbon from rye, and paralegal by day, drafting demand letters and organizing discovery files until my eyes burned. Rice and beans 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. Thrift store clothes from secondhand shops on Dyckman Street. 0 vacations for 36 months straight. Every paycheck, every tip, every holiday bonus, every tax refund went into the account. I tracked it in a color-coded spreadsheet, green for my deposits, blue for James's, yellow for family contributions. My mother contributed $200. She handed me the check at her kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, and I sat there holding it and crying because I knew exactly what that money was. How many floors scrubbed on hands and knees, how many 8-hour shifts standing at a register, how much of her already thin life it represented. "For the flowers?" she said, touching my face. "Make them beautiful, mija. For your abuela?" Carlos, 23, electrician's apprentice, gave us $500 in cash in a white envelope with a smiley face drawn on the front and, "For the open bar, don't let Tia Marta near the tequila," written underneath. James's parents, Richard and Patricia Morrow, contributed $5,000, presented at their Stamford dining table with ceremony. Patricia beaming, Richard shaking my hand. They liked me. Or they performed liking me. I'm no longer certain which, and it no longer matters. By the end of year 1, the account held $41,000. End of year 2, $78. 3 weeks before the ceremony, $102,400. I can still see that number on the blue Chase screen, bold and final, the transaction history beneath it clean and orderly. That was the last time the number was real. The last time anything about my life with James Morrow was real. What I should have noticed and didn't, because I was working 70-hour weeks and running on coffee and the particular fuel that burns in a person who can see the finish line, was that James's deposits had gotten irregular around month 16. Not missing, just irregular. Sometimes a few days late. Sometimes slightly less than the agreed amount. Twice, deposits were followed the next day by small withdrawals, 300 here, 450 there, with memo lines that said refund or adjustment. I saw them in the statements. I asked about it once on a quiet Tuesday evening while James was cooking and I was scrolling the banking app at the kitchen counter. "What's this withdrawal for 300? I asked, not accusatory, just curious, the tone of someone checking a line item in a spreadsheet. James didn't turn from the stove. "Double charge correction from the bank. Happens sometimes with the auto deposit. I called, they fixed it." "Okay, good. Want me to forward you the confirmation email?" He turned then, spatula in hand, and smiled. "The slow one? The one I loved?" "No, it's fine. Just checking." He came over and kissed my forehead. "I love that you track everything so carefully. Most people wouldn't bother." Another smile. "We're in good hands." I went back to my spreadsheet. I was so focused on the number climbing that I ignored the moments it briefly dipped. That was the crack I walked right past. That Tuesday evening in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and olive oil, his lips on my forehead. That was the moment I should have understood everything. I didn't. People rarely do, when the alternative requires demolishing a future you've built with your own hands over 3 years. The first real fracture came 5 months before the wedding. A chase notification on my phone while I was eating lunch at my desk. Withdrawal of $4,999. Exactly $1 below the $5,000 alert threshold I'd set. My stomach clenched before my brain caught up. I called James. Easy, relaxed. The voice of a man not expecting this particular call. "Oh yeah, that was the deposit for the Aruba resort. Non-refundable, 6 months out. I sent you the email." He had a forwarded booking confirmation from a travel website. Resort name, room type, dates, dollar amount, all matching perfectly. What I didn't know was that the confirmation was fabricated. A template found online, numbers edited, forwarded from an address that looked legitimate but wasn't. No reservation existed at that resort under our names. The $5,000 had gone to a checking account belonging to a woman named Danielle Becker in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But I looked at the email, felt the knot in my stomach loosen, told myself I was being paranoid, and went back to planning my wedding. That was the first $4,999. Over the following 7 months, 101,000 more would follow. Always calibrated to stay below my alert threshold. Always with a story ready. Always with something that looked like documentation if you didn't look too closely. The wedding was set for October 14th at the Grand Meridian Hotel in Westchester County. 200 guests. Garden ceremony, ballroom reception, string quartet for the ceremony, DJ for the party. Italian catering from a restaurant in New Rochelle my mother had personally taste tested 3 times, once bringing Carlos as backup because a man eats differently and I need to know about the portions. Flowers by Maria, a florist in Yonkers who did Dominican and Puerto Rican weddings and understood without explanation what I meant when I said white roses with one single yellow one in the bridal bouquet. For my grandmother. The dress was from a bridal shop on Fordham Road in the Bronx. Not designer, but it fit like it was made specifically for my body. Lace sleeves, cathedral train, a neckline that made my mother press both hands to her mouth the first time I stepped out of the fitting room and stand there for a full 30 seconds unable to speak. Total budget, $95,000 with a $7,000 emergency cushion. We were under budget. Everything paid in advance. Everything perfect. I believed that with my entire heart, right up until the Wednesday afternoon, 11 days before the ceremony, when everything stopped being true. James had left his iPad on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. Open to a messaging app I'd never seen installed on his phone. I was not snooping. I want to be clear about that, because I know how the next part sounds. I was looking for the shared recipe app, the one with our saved rehearsal dinner menu options. I picked up the iPad, swiped to find it, and the screen was already open to a conversation. The contact was saved simply as D. The most recent message, received 40 minutes earlier. "He's asking about you again. He said Daddy at the park yesterday. I can't keep doing this alone, James. You promised." He said Daddy. At the park. A child who was calling James Daddy. I read those 7 words 4 times. Each time they rearranged into a shape that didn't fit inside the life I was living. My fingers went numb first, a tingling that crept from the tips to my wrists, as if circulation itself was debating what to do. My throat closed, not gradually, but instantly, like something from outside had pressed hard against my windpipe. My vision narrowed. The kitchen counter, the coffee maker, the fruit bowl all went soft and gray at the edges, and the only thing that remained in focus was the screen. My legs decided, independently of my brain, that they were no longer participating in standing. I lowered myself to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, cold tile under bare feet. The hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the apartment, and I scrolled up. 14 months of conversation. 247 messages. I read every single one. It took an hour and 20 minutes. By the last message, I knew everything I needed to know and a few things I hadn't wanted to. Danielle Becker, 31 years old, Bridgeport, Connecticut, 40 minutes from James's parents in Stamford. They'd been together, on and off, since before he moved to the area, which meant before he met me. Their son, Lucas, was born in August 2 years ago, which meant he was conceived in November 3 years ago, 4 months after our first date. 4 months after he told me I was the most interesting person he'd talked to in months. She knew about me, about the engagement, about the wedding. 6 months ago, she'd written, "You're really going to marry her? What about us? What about Lucas?" His response, "It's complicated. I need more time. I love you both." "I love you both." Typed while sleeping in my bed, eating my dinners, depositing money into the account I'd built with bartending tips and thrift store clothing, and 36 months of not buying myself anything I didn't absolutely need. And the money. Starting 7 months ago, the messages had shifted. References to transfers, to payments, to need. "Got it, thank you. Rent is due Friday. Can you send it early this month? Lucas needs shoes, and the car payment is late. I put the $2,200 toward the credit card like you said." James had been feeding another family from our wedding account. From the account with my mother's $200, with Carlos's $500 and the smiley face, with my bartending tips, with 3 years of my life. I set the iPad face down on the counter, walked to the bathroom, vomited, hot, convulsive, my whole body against the porcelain, washed my face with cold water, looked in the mirror at a woman with streaked mascara, gray skin, and red eyes. And then something shifted behind my sternum. Not gradually, not softly. A click, like a deadbolt sliding into place. The tears stopped. The trembling in my hands stopped. The voice in my head asking questions went quiet. What remained was silence. Clean, functional, dangerous silence. I dried my face with a towel, walked back to the kitchen, sat at the table, opened the laptop, and logged into Chase. Balance, $11,340.42. $102,000 had become $11,340. $91,000 gone. I screenshotted every page of the account history, every message on the iPad, all 247. I forwarded everything to my personal email, then to a backup address I created in 90 seconds. Then I picked up my phone. "Mommy, come over right now. Don't ask me why." Rosa Vargas arrived in 35 minutes. She walked through the door, looked at my face, and said nothing. Because my mother is a woman who has survived enough in her 61 years to know that some faces don't need questions. They need chairs. She sat at the kitchen table. I set the iPad in front of her and opened the bank statements on the laptop. "Read everything?" I said. She read for 40 minutes without speaking. Her lips moved slightly the way they do when she reads English, which is not her first language and never will be, but which she navigates with the precision and dignity of someone who learned everything important. When she finished, she closed the laptop, folded her hands on the table the way she folds them in church, and looked at me with an expression I had seen exactly once before. The morning she found out my father was never coming back. Not surprise, not grief. Something with a skeleton inside it. Something that could support its own weight. "What do you want to do, mija?" she asked, her voice steady as a load-bearing beam. "Destroy him," I said. "But smart." She nodded once, slowly, with the finality of a decision that cannot be walked back. "Then we do it smart." I went to Karen Ostrowski the next morning, my boss at the law firm. Litigation attorney, 22 years of practice. A woman opposing counsel starts dreading around the 3rd minute of meeting her. Silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, speech with the precision of a surgical instrument. I laid out everything. She listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back and steepled her fingers. "The account withdrawals are potentially actionable, breach of fiduciary duty, given the documented agreed-upon purpose of the funds," she said. "Don't confront him. Don't move any money. 3 copies of everything, 3 separate locations." She paused, and her eyes changed, sharpened the way they do when she knows she's about to win something. Is the venue fully paid for? Everything. Venue, catering, flowers, quartet, DJ. The money he stole was the remaining balance. Honeymoon, emergency cushion, gift fund. Karen set her pen down with deliberate precision. So you have a fully paid venue for 200 people, she said. 11 days, and documented evidence that your fiancé has been committing financial fraud while maintaining a secret family. A pause. What you do with that room and those 200 people is entirely up to you. But I'll tell you this. I've been in courtrooms for over 2 decades, and there is no judge, no jury, no legal mechanism on earth that delivers justice the way 200 witnesses do. 11 days. I spent them in 2 simultaneous realities, and that period was both the most exhausting and the most clarifying experience of my life. In one reality, I was the excited bride. Final dress fitting, seating chart confirmed, rehearsal dinner attended with James's hand in mine, saying, "I can't wait to be your wife," and meaning every syllable of it the way an actor means their lines. Completely, temporarily, with full commitment. In the other reality, I was assembling something precise and devastating and completely airtight. 3 people. My mother, who handled logistics with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who has been underestimated by every system she's ever encountered and is about to provide a vivid demonstration of why that was their mistake. Carlos, who listened to the plan and said he'd rather handle it differently, knuckles cracking meaningfully, but agreed when I explained that what I needed from him was his presence, his height, his ability to stand very still and look very dangerous at exactly the right moment. And Adriana Reyes, my best friend since college, now an IT specialist, who responded to my phone call with a long silence and then, "Send me every screenshot. I'm going to build a slideshow that ends his social life in this time zone." Adriana worked for 4 days, 27 slides, screenshots of every key message with full context, bank statements showing each withdrawal with date and amount, the fabricated Aruba confirmation placed side by side with the resort's actual booking page, no reservation under our names, and the timeline, a visual map of dates. James was with me layered against dates he messaged Danielle, showing that on the night of our engagement party, while my mother was crying with joy and Carlos was pouring champagne and I was showing my ring to every person I loved, James had texted Danielle at 11:47 p.m. "I'll figure this out. Just give me time. Kiss Lucas for me." But the masterstroke, the thing that still makes me oscillate between horror and fierce bone-deep pride, was what my mother did. Rosa Vargas picked up her phone, found the number in the messages, and called Danielle Becker directly. She introduced herself as a wedding coordinator from the Grand Meridian, calling to confirm guest attendance and dietary preferences for the Morrow Vargas reception. Danielle, audibly confused, said she hadn't received an invitation. My mother, without missing a single beat, explained there must have been a data entry error, that the groom had personally added her to the list. Vegetarian or chicken? Danielle chose chicken. She mentioned she'd be bringing her son. "Of course," my mother said, in her warmest, most professionally maternal voice. "We'll have a high chair ready, row 3, left side, aisle seat. You'll have a wonderful view of the ceremony." She hung up, looked at me across the kitchen table. "She's coming. Chicken, high chair. Row 3. The woman who scrubs other people's floors on her knees had just arranged the seating of my fiancé's secret family at his own wedding, in her second language, in under 4 minutes, without a single tremor in her voice. The morning of October 14th, 5 a.m. in my mother's apartment. I hadn't slept. The dress hung on the bedroom door, lace sleeves catching the gray pre-dawn light, cathedral train pooled on the floor in a white lake. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling and thought about Abuela Carmen. Flower arches, champagne towers, dresses like clouds. This was the dress. This was the day. Just not the story she had imagined for me. But maybe, I thought in the pre-dawn quiet, what she'd actually been teaching me all those Sundays had nothing to do with weddings at all. Maybe it was about what happens when what you're building turns into something else entirely. Maybe courage isn't the absence of fear. Maybe courage is being terrified and picking up the microphone anyway. Carlos picked us up at noon in a rented black SUV. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Adriana had been at the venue since 10, setting up the projector and screen in the ballroom. She'd told the events coordinator it was a surprise photo montage of the couple's love story. The coordinator thought it was romantic. It was not romantic. 3 p.m., the garden, 200 white chairs in a semicircle. The rose arch. Pachelbel's canon from the string quartet, notes floating across the manicured lawn and dissolving into the October air. Objectively, everything I had ever wanted. Every rose, every note, every thread of lace on that dress was mine. Earned. Paid for. Nobody was taking any of it. I walked down the aisle on Carlos's arm, not my father's. My father had been gone for 25 years. Carlos was 24 in his tailored suit, his jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. The only thing standing between his hands and James's face was the promise he'd made me. I squeezed his arm. He looked at me sideways, the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. James stood at the altar in charcoal gray, wearing the slow smile I had loved for 3 years. Happy, relaxed. A man who had successfully maintained 2 parallel lives for 3 years and was now standing at the altar of one of them with complete confidence that the other would never appear in this garden. The officiant began. James read his vows first, beautiful words about how I was the strongest person he'd ever known, how I'd taught him what it means to build something real, something that lasts. The audience smiled. Some dabbed their eyes. Patricia Morrow pressed a tissue to her nose. My mother's face could have been carved from something harder than marble. Carlos stared at the floor. Adriana stood at the ballroom entrance with her phone in her hand. "Elena," the officiant said with a warm smile. "Your vows." One breath. I looked at James. At 200 people who believed they were watching a love story. Then I looked at row 3, left side, aisle seat, where a woman I had never met was holding a 2-year-old boy with dark eyes and a jawline I recognized instantly because I had kissed it every morning for 3 years. "Before I read my vows," I said, and my voice came out level, almost gentle, carrying that particular calm that arrives when you have burned through every other emotion, and what remains is just the truth with all its clothes off. I need to say something to everyone in this room, because the man standing in front of me is not who you think he is, and he is not who I thought he was either. James's smile didn't drop immediately. It froze first, the way a computer screen freezes before crashing, still displaying the last image while the system behind it collapses. Then his eyes moved, not to me, to the audience, scanning the rows. He found her. Row 3. Danielle was already looking at him, her face the color of lime plaster, Lucas squirming on her lap. "For 3 years," I continued, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the garden, "James has been in a relationship with a woman named Danielle Becker, who is sitting right there." I pointed, calmly, the way you indicate evidence in a courtroom, without drama, without theater. "That boy on her lap is Lucas. He is 2 years old. He is James's son." The silence that followed had physical weight. 200 people inhaled simultaneously and did not exhale. The string quartet stopped mid-phrase. The cellist's bow hovered an inch above the strings. Somewhere in the garden's oak tree, a bird called once and went quiet, as if even the wildlife had understood this was not the moment. James's mother started to rise from her seat and sat back down hard, his father's hand gripping her forearm. "Sit down, Patricia," came a low, strained voice. "Sit down. I also need everyone in this room to know what happened to our wedding fund," I said, letting each sentence land before the next arrived. $102,000, 3 months ago. Today there is $11,000. James transferred $91,000 to Danielle over 7 months. Rent, car payments, credit cards, their son. I paused. My mother's contribution was in that account. $200 from her cleaning wages. My brother's $500 from his apprenticeship. My bartending tips. 3 years of 2 jobs and not a single day off. All of it. Gone. James stepped toward me. His voice had dropped, lower, urgent, the voice of a man recalculating in real time. "Elena, listen, we can talk about this, just let me explain." "We are past talking, James," I said, and my voice was so steady it surprised even me. "If you would just give me a chance." "You had 3 years of chances. You used them to build a second family and pay for it with my money." From row 3, Danielle stood. Lucas was crying, the bewildered, hiccuping cry of a toddler who doesn't understand why the world around him has suddenly changed pitch. But Danielle's face was not bewildered. It was sharp, clear. The expression of a woman who has just had a lock click open in her mind and is seeing, for the first time, the full layout of the room she has been trapped inside. "He told me he was leaving you," she said, and her voice cracked across the garden like a dry branch breaking underfoot. "He told me the wedding was called off. He told me he was coming home to us, to Lucas." James turned toward her. "Danielle, don't what?" Something sharp and furious moved through her voice. "Don't tell the truth? Isn't that exactly what she is doing right now?" She pointed at me, and in that gesture was something I had not planned for and did not have a word for until much later. Solidarity. Not friendship, not warmth. The raw, furious, completely unscripted alliance of two women who have just realized simultaneously that they have been managed by the same hands, deceived by the same methods, hollowed out by the same lies. James stood between us. Between the altar and row 3. Between two lives built on the same foundation of deception and other people's money. His hands were shaking. The boutonniere had come loose from his lapel. The charcoal suit I'd helped him choose on a sunny Saturday in Stamford 3 months ago looked like a costume, which is exactly what it had always been. "I'm not marrying you, James," I said, and the steadiness in my voice frightened even me. "But I didn't cancel the wedding. This room is paid for. Every rose on that arch, every note from that quartet, every inch of lace on this dress, I paid for it. With money I earned working 2 jobs for 3 years, and I am not wasting a single dollar of it." I turned to face the guests. "There will be no ceremony today. But there is a fully catered reception in the ballroom with a DJ and an open bar that I paid for in advance, and I intend to use every bit of it. Anyone who would like to stay is welcome. Dinner is at 6. The pasta is excellent. My mother picked the caterer." Carlos rose from the front row. Slowly, all 6'1" of him, arms at his sides, hands open, eyes locked on James with the particular stillness of a man who is deploying the last reserve of his restraint. "I think you should leave, James," he said quietly. But the microphone was still live, and every syllable carried to every corner of the garden, to every person in every row. "While you still can." James's brother David, who had been standing behind him as best man, with an expression that had been moving steadily from confused to devastated, put a hand on James's shoulder. "Come on, man," he said, barely a whisper. "It's over. Just come on." He guided James down the side steps of the altar, through the garden, past the rose arch, past the fountain, around the corner of the hotel. Gone. That was the last time I saw James Morrow in person. What happened next was the part I hadn't planned. My mother rose from her front row chair. She smoothed her navy dress, Macy's, purchased with a coupon 3 days before the wedding, and she looked absolutely impeccable in it. She walked to the microphone. She stood there, 5'3", hands clasped in front of her, and looked at 200 faces. And in her accented, careful, completely unshakable English, she said, "My daughter worked very hard for this party. 3 years, 2 jobs. The food is ready, the music is ready. If you would like to stay, we celebrate her. Not a wedding, not a man. Her. She deserves a party. She has earned it." The first person to stand was Danielle Becker. Row 3, left side, Lucas on her hip, tears still wet on her cheeks, and she started clapping, slowly at first, then harder. Then someone in row 7, someone behind me. Row 12. Carlos. Adriana in the ballroom doorway, crying and laughing simultaneously in the way that only happens when something is simultaneously terrible and exactly right. Within 30 seconds, 163 of 200 guests were on their feet, and the applause filled the garden and bounced off the hotel walls and rose into the October sky. And I am absolutely certain in a way I cannot explain rationally, but will never doubt, that it reached wherever my grandmother was watching from. The reception was everything I had planned it to be. The DJ played the songs I'd chosen. The caterer served the Italian food my mother had selected. The bar was open. For 4 hours, 163 people celebrated in the room that was decorated for a wedding that didn't happen. My mother danced with Carlos. Adriana, still crying, gave a toast that became a tribute to what happened instead of what was supposed to happen. Danielle stayed. She sat at a table near the back with Lucas, who ate chicken fingers with the complete focus of a small child, seemingly unaware that he had just become the incidental agent of his father's public unraveling. At some point, I found myself at the bar next to Danielle. "I didn't know about the money," she said quietly. "He told me it was his savings." "I believe you," I said. "I'm sorry, Elena." "You don't owe me an apology, he does." I looked at Lucas, who was reaching for another chicken finger. "Take care of your son, and get a good lawyer." She almost smiled. "You have one?" "I do. She's terrifying." Karen Ostrowski filed the civil suit 14 days after the non-wedding. Breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion of funds. The screenshots, bank records, fabricated confirmation, and 200 eyewitnesses constituted what Karen described, with audible satisfaction, as the most thoroughly documented case of relationship fraud I have encountered in 22 years of practice. James's attorney offered $30,000 to settle. Karen laughed on the phone and said, "My client contributed $62,000 of her own earned income to that account. Your client withdrew $91,000. We are not beginning at 30. The settlement was finalized 6 weeks later. $87,000 plus Karen's legal fees. James moved into a studio apartment in Stamford. His company quietly transferred him to a territory with fewer client-facing responsibilities. Danielle filed for child support, which was granted. My parents' friends heard about the wedding. Our neighbors heard about the wedding. The entire construction technology industry eventually heard about the wedding. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Washington Heights, 3 blocks from my mother. I stopped working 2 jobs. I slept a full night for the first time in 3 years. Karen offered me a position as office manager with a raise in benefits, and the understanding that if I wanted law school, she'd write the recommendation letter herself. I'm still thinking about it. My mother comes over every Sunday. She cooks. She tells me about her telenovela. She doesn't ask about James. She doesn't ask if I'm seeing anyone. She doesn't ask if I'm okay, because she knows I am, and she knows it, because she raised me to be. The dress hangs in a garment bag in the back of my closet. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Last Sunday, my mother sat at my kitchen table while I made coffee. The light came through the window the way it does in Abuela's stories. Golden, steady, warm, the kind that makes everything look like it's receiving its own personal absolution. She was quiet for a long time. "Your grandmother would have been proud of you, mija," she said finally. "Not because of the wedding, because of what you did when the wedding became something else." I set the coffee down. "I didn't feel brave, Mommy." She looked at me with the expression she reserves for things she's saying not to comfort, but because they're true. Brave people never feel it. That's exactly how you know it's real. I sat across from her. The coffee was good. The apartment was warm. Outside, Washington Heights was doing what it does on a Sunday morning. Music from somewhere down the block, a dog barking, someone's grandmother calling from a 4th-floor window in Spanish, and nobody finding any of that unusual because it has always been exactly this way, and always will be. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. In the closet behind me, pressed between the pages of the cookbook my grandmother left my mother, who left it to me, was the yellow rose from my bouquet. Dry now, fragile, most of its color gone, but still there, still mine. Abuela was right. Nobody handed it to me. I built it myself. Every cent, every brick, every word spoken at that altar in place of a vow. And what I built, even now, even with this cost, even with what burned, is exactly enough. Just like she taught me.